Florence. Narrow streets, stone buildings, the sound of bells. In this city once lived a family far more powerful than kings. They wore no crown and commanded no armies. Yet, kings were indebted to them. Popes were dependent on them, and Europe moved at their pace. The name of this family, the Medici. The Medici family was not born a noble dynasty. They were not warriors. They rose not with the sword, but with calculations. Even the origin of their name is not entirely clear. Some say it comes from medico, meaning physician. Others, just a common Florentine family. But one thing is certain, the Medici emerged from the guilds, textile trade, wool and fabric. The heart of Florence beat here, and the Medici learned the rhythm of that heart very early on. By the end of the 14th century, Europe was changing dramatically. Wars were fought. But the real power lay where money changed hands. And this is where one man stepped onto the stage, Giovanni di Bici de' Medici. Giovanni was a merchant, but he was no ordinary person. He had connections with the papal circles in Rome. He knew who needed money and most crucially, who could be trusted. In 1397, the Medici Bank was established in Florence. This was not just a bank. This was the very nervous system of Europe itself. The Medici Bank grew rapidly, from Florence to Rome, from Venice to Milan. But what truly made them different was this. They became the bankers of the papacy. The papal treasury was held by the Medici. The Pope's debt was owed to the Medici. And in the Middle Ages, this was the greatest power a single family could possess. The Medici didn't coerce anyone. They didn't threaten anyone. They simply extended credit. And credit created dependency. But there's a deeper layer here. The church strictly forbade usury, charging interest on loans. It was a sin. So how did the Medici make a profit on massive papal loans? They didn't charge interest. Instead, they used the exchange rate loophole. They would loan the Pope gold florins in Rome, but demand repayment in London or Bruges at a slightly different currency valuation. This allowed them to collect a profit, essentially interest, while technically remaining within the bounds of canon law. This method wasn't invented by the Medici, but they perfected it. They mastered the art of making money while the rest of Europe was busy worrying about going to hell. When Giovanni died, his son took his place, Cosimo de' Medici. Florence was officially a republic, but Cosimo was the person who ran the city from behind the scenes. He held no formal title. He had no official authority. Yet everyone consulted him on everything: taxes, wars, diplomacy. Cosimo made power invisible, and this rendered his enemies helpless. In 1433, his rivals finally exiled him. They thought they had won. Cosimo's response was silent, brutal, and utterly financial. He quietly signaled his bank managers across Europe to recall outstanding loans in Florence. Overnight, liquidity vanished. The city's largest debtors, the merchants, the guilds, the very politicians who voted to exile him, were suddenly bankrupt. It took Florence less than 1 year to realize their mistake. They didn't exile a man, they exiled the entire economy. Cosimo was invited back as a hero. He never had to lift a sword. The Medici didn't only work with nobles, they forged ties with the common people, popolani, the middle class, the artisans. Their loans were easy. Their terms were merciful. Rival banks were harsher. The Medici were more patient. The result? Everyone in Florence, in some way, was indebted to the Medici. This was no coincidence. This was a system carefully designed, patiently built. The Medici did not hoard their money. They displayed it, but not with gold, with art, sculptures, libraries, theaters. Artists were under Medici patronage, because the Medici knew one thing very well: art legitimizes power. The Renaissance truly blossomed here. Latin retreated. The local language rose. Florence began to transcend being just a city. It transformed into a cultural center. And then came Lorenzo de' Medici. The name history gave him, Lorenzo the Magnificent. Patron of the arts, master of diplomacy, a figure recognized in European courts. The Medici name resonated not just in Florence, but across Europe. Under Lorenzo, Florence didn't just lead Italy. It defined an era. But this magnificence was nearly shattered when the rival Pazzi family, backed by powerful figures within the papal circle, brutally murdered Lorenzo's brother during Mass. The survival of the Medici hung by a thread. Lorenzo's response was pure genius. He used a mixture of public fury, diplomatic maneuvering, and vast Medici funds to turn the entire situation into a public relations victory. He transformed a bloody assassination attempt into a moral mandate for Medici rule. This was the family's peak. But every system grows heavier as it expands. Every kind of power forces its own counterbalance. The Medici were now too big, too centralized, and too indispensable. And history shows us this. No system ever operates perfectly forever. The thing that carried the Medici to the top, it wasn't the money, it wasn't the art, it wasn't even the banking. The thing that propelled them to the peak was the system they built. But inside that system there were invisible cracks. And those cracks would one day change everything. But that is the subject of another video.